Overnight, Brown was asked to pay $3,000 more for the exact same garage. There was no additional door. There was no additional square footage. And Brown had not requested any change in materials. The only new development was a 50% tariff on the type of cement imported from Canada. The contractor used it to raise the estimate from $20,000 to $23,000. But when Brown checked the math, something did not add up. Only $2,000 of the entire project involved cement covered by the tariff. Even if the complete 50% tariff were passed directly to Brown, it would explain only $1,000, not $3,000. So where did the other $2,000 come from? To find the answer, Brown needed to separate a real tariff cost from the charges placed behind two words. Because of tariffs. 1 month earlier, everything had been simple. Brown wanted to build a small garage beside his house. The contractor measured the space. He calculated the number of working days. He listed the wood, wiring, roofing, concrete and other necessary materials. Then he gave Brown a fixed estimate. $20,000. Brown spent several weeks preparing the money. He did not expand the design. He did not add any windows. He did not request an electrical upgrade. So when the estimate increased by $3,000, Brown wanted to know exactly what had changed. He asked the contractor to divide the original estimate into categories. $8,000 was for labor. $2,000 covered permits, design and inspections. $8,000 covered wood, roofing, electrical work and other materials. The remaining $2,000 covered the imported cement used in the concrete portion of the project. The total was $20,000. These numbers are simplified so we can clearly follow the movement of the cost. The 50% tariff did not apply to the entire project. It did not apply to the construction workers' labor. It did not apply to the permits. It did not apply to the electrical system. And it did not apply to every material used in the garage. In this case, the tariff applied only to $2,000 of imported cement. 50% of $2,000 is $1,000. If that complete tariff cost were passed directly to Brown, the estimate would increase from $20,000 to $21,000. The total project would increase by 5%, not 50%. The 50% number in the headline could still be correct. The 5% increase in the complete project could also be correct. They were measuring two different things. 50% was the tariff rate applied to the value of one specific product. 5% was the direct effect of that tariff on the complete garage project. But Brown still did not know whether he should actually carry the entire $1,000 himself. The person who pays a tariff first is not necessarily the person who ultimately loses the money. Imagine a shipment of Canadian cement worth $100. When the shipment enters the United States, a 50% tariff creates a $50 charge. The American importer pays that money at the border. But after paying it, the importer has several choices. It can keep the old selling price and accept a lower profit. It can ask the Canadian producer to reduce its price. It can raise the price charged to the distributor. Or it can stop importing Canadian cement and find another supplier. If the Canadian producer lowers its price, it carries part of the cost. If the importer keeps the old selling price, it carries part of the cost. If the importer raises its price, the cost continues through the distributor, the building supplier and the contractor. Eventually, part of it may appear in Brown's estimate. In this case, the supplier had passed the complete direct increase to the contractor. That explained the first line in the revised estimate. Cement price adjustment, add $1,000. Brown could verify this charge. There was a specific material. There was an original value of $2,000. There was a 50% tariff. And there was a $1,000 result. But the estimate was still another $2,000 higher. Brown kept reading. The second line said, priority sourcing and transportation, add $700. The third line said, price volatility contingency, add $1,300. $1,000 for the cement. $700 for sourcing and transportation. $1,300 for price risk. The total was $3,000. The tariff had started the change. But only part of the increase was the direct tariff cost. The other $2,000 came from decisions businesses made after the market change. Brown started with the $700 charge. He asked the contractor, do we actually need priority transportation? The contractor explained that the original supplier could no longer guarantee the delivery date. If the cement arrived late, the construction schedule might have to change. The $700 was added so the contractor could source the material from another warehouse and have it delivered more quickly. Brown then asked, "What if I accept starting the project 1 week later?" In that case, priority transportation was no longer necessary. The $700 was not a tariff. It was the price of preserving the original construction schedule. If Brown needed the garage completed on a specific date, the charge might be reasonable. If he could wait, it could be avoided. Brown then looked at the largest line. Price volatility contingency, $1,300. This charge was not connected to a specific shipment of cement. It was not connected to a specific delivery truck either. The contractor had added it because he did not know how material prices might change before the purchase was made. The supplier might increase prices again. The shipment could be delayed. Domestic products could sell out. Or the contractor might have to purchase materials from a more expensive source. The contingency protected the contractor from losing money if any of those things happened. That did not automatically mean the contractor was being dishonest. He was placing a price on uncertainty. But Brown needed to know what he was receiving in exchange for $1,300. He asked, "If material prices do not increase, will this amount be removed from my bill?" The contractor answered, "No, but if prices increase again, your total estimate of $23,000 will remain unchanged." Brown now understood what the $1,300 really represented. It was not a tariff. It was the price of a guarantee. If material costs rose sharply, the contractor would carry the additional cost. If material costs did not rise, the contractor would keep the contingency. Brown was no longer simply comparing $20,000 with $23,000. He was comparing an old price that was no longer certain with a higher price that was guaranteed. But before signing, Brown requested another option. He asked the contractor, "What if we do not use Canadian cement?" The contractor found a supplier in the United States. This shipment would not face the tariff applied to the Canadian product. But its price was still higher than before. Many other contractors were also switching to domestic suppliers. The factories were receiving more orders, but they could not instantly double production. When demand increases faster than supply, domestic prices can rise too. That means a tariff can make Brown pay more even when he does not purchase the product directly covered by it. The tariff does not need to touch the material Brown eventually uses. It only needs to change the market surrounding that material. The contractor returned with a second estimate. The material would be made in the United States. It was already in stock. The price would be guaranteed for 30 days. Brown would have to accept starting the project 1 week later. The total cost was $21,600. That was $1,600 more than the original estimate. But it was $1,400 less than the Canadian supplier option. Brown now had 3 choices. The first option: keep the Canadian supplier. Begin the project on schedule. Lock the total price at $23,000. The second option: switch to the American supplier. Begin the project 1 week later. Lock the total price at $21,600. The third option: delay the project. Brown could wait for the market to stabilize or for material prices to fall. But waiting also carried risks. The building permit could expire. Labor costs could increase. The contractor could accept another project. And there was no guarantee that cement prices would fall. Brown realized that he could not eliminate every risk. He could only choose which kind of risk he was willing to accept. Brown did not need the garage completed immediately. A 1-week delay would not create a serious problem. So he chose the domestic material option with a total price of $21,600. Not because an American product was automatically better. Not because it was completely protected from the effects of the tariff. And not because Brown believed all tariffs were good or all tariffs were bad. He chose it because 3 factors were clear: the material, the delivery date, and the complete price. Before signing the agreement, Brown wrote down the 4 questions that had helped him find the missing $2,000. The first question: which exact item became more expensive? Not everything. Not the market. A specific line in the estimate. The second question: how many dollars did the direct tariff add to the complete bill? A large tariff applied to a small portion of a project does not mean the complete project increases by the same percentage. The third question: are the remaining increases required, avoidable, or simply contingencies? Priority transportation could be avoided if Brown was willing to wait. A contingency could be reasonable if it came with a guaranteed price. But neither of those charges was a direct tariff. The fourth question. Is there an alternative with a better total cost? Not just a lower material price. Brown needed to compare transportation, timing, quality, risk, and the final amount he would pay. Overnight, Brown's estimate had increased from $20,000 to $23,000. But Brown did not accept that number simply because he saw a 50% tariff. He separated the estimate into individual parts. $1,000 was the direct increase on the material covered by the tariff. $700 was the price of maintaining the original construction schedule. $1,300 was the price of uncertainty. Once he understood each charge, Brown found another option costing $21,600. He did not make the tariff disappear. He simply prevented every other increase from being grouped under its name. That is what buyers need to remember. When a business says its price increased because of tariffs, do not immediately assume the explanation is false. But do not take the tariff rate in a headline and multiply it by your complete bill either. Separate the increase into three parts: the direct tariff cost, the market's reaction, and the price of uncertainty. A tariff begins at the border, but the final amount depends on every decision made afterward. So the most important question is not, the tariff is 50%, so will everything become 50% more expensive? The right question is, of the money I am being asked to pay, how much actually came from the tariff, and what am I paying for with the rest?